Anger is a natural emotion, and it exists to move you into action against danger, against demeaning and unjust treatment. Anger moves you to fight back, to speak up, to get away. So if you were exposed to a parent's rage when you were a child and you learned that anger is dangerous and crazy and has to be avoided, you may have trouble recognizing legitimate anger. And yes, there is such a thing as irrational anger. Every person is guilty of it sometimes, and some people take it to dangerous extremes. But the thing about people who were abused and neglected as kids and who learn to attack themselves for feeling angry is that they are very vulnerable to abuse as adults. So if this is you, you might be easily deceived. You might be all too willing to participate in a lie that's being told that everything's okay here and you're just making too big a deal out of things. Or you might be quick to turn against yourself and try to abandon your own happiness, your own inner voice about what's really happening. And because telling the truth to someone abusing you really can get you hurt or left, the stakes feel way too high sometimes to face the truth. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Tenzen, and she writes, "Hi, Anna. I have been married for the last 3 years. I feel very angry with my husband most of the time and keep having thoughts about leaving the relationship. However, I'm not sure if my anger is justified because he tells me I'm just being negative and the situation is not so dire." All right, circling with my fairy pencil, we'll come back on a second reading, but let's hear what Tenzen is telling us about her situation. "I am his third wife, and there is a 15-year age gap between us. He has an 8-year-old son from the previous marriage, and his ex lives 5 blocks away from us. They had a very complicated relationship. My friends, and to some extent my family, warned me about the difficult situation I was getting into, but I was very happy in the beginning, so I ignored them. He was getting out of a marriage as we got close, and we finally decided to get married 3 months after his ex moved out. However, because we were in different countries, we only started living together after a year. In the beginning, it was the little things like him being possessive or insecure or very sensitive about things. I thought all that will pass when we get together. When we started living together, he would fight with me for not giving him what he wanted in bed, asking me to do things I didn't enjoy. He said I had tried things in the past, so why not with him? The issue got worse with time. He would walk out on me during sex, complaining that I don't do enough, and he'd coerce me in other ways. I finally left him to go back to my parents. During this time, he spoke to my dad and told him about my intimate past and said I was leaving my marriage for my ex. My dad got very mad and asked me to leave. I came back and my husband promised to make things right. Our fights only got worse and I felt forced into the relationship. I went into severe depression. I got sick. He said he couldn't handle my mental health issues. I left again. This time he called me a whore because I didn't address his needs and sent me divorce papers without negotiating alimony. My family reacted very badly to this. Although they were coming around to accepting my divorce, I was reeling from what felt like abandonment melange. I hated him, but I couldn't leave him. I decided to come back as he apologized and said we could go into couples therapy. My dad also gave him a piece of his mind and told me to call the police if he ever coerced me sexually again. I came back and he changed his behavior for the better, but we couldn't get couples therapy as we were advised to work on ourselves. Meanwhile, his temper around his kid over homework and not getting things right, he's a loving father otherwise, made me feel uncomfortable. I would have fights with him trying to save the kid from his anger. In the meantime, his ex kept creating issues. She would write me abusive emails saying I was living in her house. My stepson would get cross with me too, but I won him over with love and patience. Lately, she's been sending me emails containing her and my husband's past chats that has left me gutted. He lied about the nature of their relationship, and I feel naive for having fallen for the same words. She threatens and abuses me at times, and then fawns and calls me her little sister. My husband bickers with her over things like my stepson's homework or performance, and they threaten each other with court action and full custody. I get copied on all the emails. My husband takes out the frustration on me and his son at times. But somehow, when he's fine and I try to talk about things, I agree it sounds like complaining. He says I'm negative and relentless. I have mental health issues that need treatment. He gives me the silent treatment. It's true I have not been in a great place because I couldn't find a job in the new country. I felt financially dependent and very insecure, as I'm not from a wealthy background, but I have a good education and have done fairly well in the past. I've also been angry for getting myself into a messy situation and not being able to leave. I have even thrown things around the house that can't really break as I'm aware of my action. I even hit him with a pillow once as he kept stonewalling me, blaming me and refusing to communicate. I'm not proud of myself and have been working hard to regulate myself, including doing grounding and daily resentment practice. However, I now stopped expressing myself in any way as it feels like I'm always in the wrong. He calls me violent and says I'm negative. He plays victim. His ex-wife claims he used to hit her and even slept with her when I was not around. I'm very confused and lost. Is my anger wrong? I've been sexually abused in childhood. I felt neglected by my parents and had to witness a lot of domestic violence growing up. I'm scared of losing a relationship and never finding love. Even as I write the email, I have not mentioned a lot of other things that went wrong. I'm not sure this relationship is the right one for me. I jumped in too soon and it feels like he's still in his ex-relationship and I am his emotional cushion. Please help me. Thank you. All right, Tenzen, I'm so sorry about this. I'll try to help. So let's go through some things you told me. You're angry. He says it's not justified. It's not dire. I'm just going to validate for you. No, it sounds incredibly crazy in that house. Some of it is like early post-divorce. It looks like you got into a relationship with somebody, as you acknowledge, you got in so soon. He wasn't really done with his wife. He's still involved in a tangle with her, and that's a really hard situation, but she lives nearby. There's a kid involved, and your husband's not really backing you up, and they don't have peace together. So, here's you. You're just from the outside, and you just jumped into this big mess. It does sound, though, like you were dating him while he was still married. So just a little bit, I'm just going to say, okay, there's one thing that you can, for your future life, you can totally just draw a line. Like, just don't do that. Don't do that. Like, limit yourself to people who are totally free and ready and interested to get to know you and are really motivated to try to bring happiness to your life and what makes you happy. It just sounds like, I don't know, I think you called it at the end of this letter, so we'll get there. So you're from another country, that's really hard, so that's a vulnerability. And I guess the difficulty of being these long distances and stuff, you jumped in, you got married. Okay, here's another one. Now you asked for help, and what I can help you with is the stuff where I can see that you missed a red flag. So here's another one. You thought that him being possessive, insecure, and very sensitive about things would pass when you were together. So that's something that people with CPTSD do. We just think, well, this is bad now. I'm sure it will pass when we live together. That's a rationalization. And really what you can count on is that people are on their best behavior early in the relationship. So if it's not acceptable in the beginning, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So it's, he sounds like he has some mental health stuff going on. Not crazy necessarily, but certainly coercive, abusive, drama prone, raging, all that stuff. This thing about trying to force you to have sex and do things that you don't want to do and shame you about it and call you a whore. This is where I would say the line's been crossed. This is not a good relationship. This is not somebody who loves you. This is not somebody capable of caring about you or what works for you. And I understand that relationships get crazy in the heat of the moment and people say things, but here's the proof that it's just not good. You went into a severe depression, you got sick, and you felt forced into the relationship. So where you question, like, is my anger justified? Like, it doesn't, you could just even set that aside. If you feel that you were forced into a relationship and you're severely depressed and sick about it, and your dad is advising you to call the cops and, I think you know what this is, and I know you do because you said so at the end. It's just kind of hard to face because I know you're scared. You're scared of the situation you're in now. You're scared of where you're going to go next. And I'm going to tell you why you can face this bravely. So then he sent divorce papers without negotiating alimony, and suddenly your family cared about how he was treating you because of the money. And I'm just guessing you're from another culture where that's a big thing. In my culture, that's just like, come on, you were supposed to believe her when he was abusive and you had to leave him. So at least your dad backed you up to say, you know, to give him a piece of his mind and to say, call the police. So then you said we couldn't get couples therapy as you were advised to work on yourselves. So this is a weird rationale. I don't know if somebody told you this or he looked into it and told you that, but this sounds like an excuse not to get couples therapy. But I would say, regardless of what happens in therapy, you haven't been there that long. This is not your child. I think you have an exit. You have a way out of this bad situation. And you should be working on yourself. I want you to work on yourself. That would be really, really good. Couples therapy, forget about it. You get therapy. You get support from people. I'm hearing in here a lot of isolation for you. And you have this education. You have a way to support yourself. You just haven't found your legs yet. And I don't know where you're going to do it, but I just really, really support you. Like, your anger is natural, and your anger is trying to tell you something. It's trying to tell you to get out. It's trying to tell you you're not safe. So this ex writes you abusive emails and then manipulates you and says you're sisters. And, it sounds like they are very, very entangled. And this thing where she says you're living in her house, a little bit I have sympathy for her because it sounds like she was thrown over for this younger woman and she was forced to move out and she doesn't get to raise her kid. And I kind of understand her anger about it. I don't like how she treats you. But what I'm just seeing is that your husband has a pattern of treating women this way, and then she's saying, oh, they slept together when you were married, and she's sending you chats. There's like no boundaries in this family. There's nobody who's willing to do anything difficult to think about your feelings here, and it's really troubling to me. You say you have mental health issues and you need treatment, and I agree, and you're not getting it there. You're getting toxified. It's sort of like you're taking poison every day around these people. So yeah, financially dependent, not from a wealthy background, but the good education. Your writing is beautiful. I have faith in you. I have faith in you, Tenzen, that you can land on your feet wherever you decide, and this might be a situation where you call a women's shelter. And you might say to yourself, well, he's not hitting me, but he has hit his wife, and he's doing this sexual coercion thing and calling you horrible names because you won't do what he wants, even though you don't want it. That is abuse, hon. That is not good. So you threw a pillow at him because he refused to communicate. I get the frustration and throwing the pillow and calling you violent. I don't know. Your anger's not wrong, but what happens, I think, sometimes when we get into like an abusive relationship is we get really caught up in trying to reason with the person. It's like, why can't they see the legitimacy of how I feel? But that's not really the issue anymore. He might see how you feel, but it doesn't matter because he can't control his rage. He can't control himself. And you've not mentioned a lot of other things, and I bet it's horrible. So Tenzen, I'm just really I'm behind you all the way. I hope you can find a way out of this situation. I hope you get a period where you get to recover and heal and find peace again and begin your life again with female friends who support you in doing what makes you happy. Living through a traumatic childhood takes extraordinary survival skills. You shut down, you act tough, you dance around to make other people feel happy, even when it means losing yourself. And sometimes the pain of all you've been through doesn't show up until after the trauma ends. And in this video, I respond to a letter from a woman I'll call Freddy, who is reckoning with a lifetime of abuse that has now affected her children, and it's got her very emotionally dysregulated. And she writes, Dear Anna, for most of my life, up until I was in my early 40s, I was a very docile and calm person. Even when I felt extremely sad or anxious, I rarely let it show. But now I find myself having extreme meltdowns and experiencing intense emotions. I guess the correct word for this is dysregulated, but I didn't know that before now. It seemed like when I met my husband about 10 years ago, I went into an emotional crisis that I have not been able to come out of. All right, I've got the fairy pencil. I'm going to circle things I want to come back to on a second reading. But right now I'm going to read through so we can hear what Freddy's going through. It's a little bit longer than usual. It's a little bit rougher than usual. So get ready. A couple of years ago, my relationship with my 35-year-old son took a sour turn when he began telling me he's never felt loved by me, and nor that he's able to have a deep connection to me. He told me that my poor life choices ruined his childhood, and that he has struggled with deep anxiety and depression as a result of it. This was shocking to me, as I thought I had given him a pretty good childhood. All this has pushed me to try to understand myself better and to look for ways to heal, because I can't help my son if I'm still broken. You also get to help yourself, Freddy. Your healing is very good. Okay. From my earliest memories, I've never felt like I belonged, not even with my own family. I've always struggled to make connections with people, even those closest to me. You fit right in with us. I've never heard of childhood PTSD, but the minute I heard you say it, I thought, that's it. I actually had been watching YouTube videos about topics like Asperger's, narcissism, bipolar, trying to gain some kind of understanding of my life when your videos popped up. I'm the youngest of 4 kids, and my mom and dad were both alcoholics. My mom has been married over 10 times, and so I never actually lived with my dad. Growing up, I was told that my siblings belonged to my mom's first husband, so they were more legitimate than I was. My father was her 3rd husband. I never had any relationship at all with his parents or any of his relatives. My mom named me after my dad, so I have a masculine name, Freddy. She sent me by myself to visit with my dad every Sunday that she could. During those visits, he would literally say things like, "Go home," and "I don't want to see you." He would sometimes get up and leave when he saw me coming. Oh my God. He would often tell me that I was just like my no-good whore mother and accuse me of trying to wheedle money from him. Sometimes I would ask him why he didn't love me, and feeling bad, I guess, he would say he loved all children, but that to him this love was the same that he has for siblings or for any neighborhood child. Then, when I was around 9 years old, he started telling me that I was not his biological child and that I needed to go home and talk to my mother about it. A few years ago, I took one of the DNA tests and found out that my biological father is actually my mom's first husband, who died when he was just 42 and I was 6. One of the things that I've struggled with the most is what happened when he passed. My mother had the older 3 kids gather around him on his deathbed to say goodbye, while I was told to stand back out of the way because he wasn't my father. Well, it turns out he actually was my father, and my mother knew it. Wow. I'm just going to comment on that right now before we come back through. You know, clearly she had an affair against her second husband with her first husband, and she was trying to keep a lie going the whole time, but she just carried that lie all the way to where none of the men fathered you. That's terrible. I'm so sorry that happened to you and that she would do that to you. The worst thing about my childhood was that my mom would disappear on us, and from the time I was an infant, she would take us all with her to visit a friend or family member, and while there, she would say that she was going to run to the store for cigarettes or soda, but she wouldn't return to get us for days or even weeks. Oh, wow. Oh my goodness, that's serious. That's a really big thing. That points to very serious problems with her. So you said, I can imagine how frustrating this was for the people we were left with, but they took it out on us. We weren't supposed to have needs like hunger or injury or illness, and we were told we were taking food out of their kids' mouths. We were usually told not to touch anything that belonged to them or their kids, and we were always lectured about how angry they were at our mom for dumping us off on them. Oh, you poor thing. That's terrible. Sometimes we were left at our grandparents', but even then we were a burden and riffraff. They called you riffraff? I hope you weren't painted with that brush that they felt towards your mom. Because riffraff, whatever it means, is somebody dumping their kids and just splitting for a long time. Because, what was she doing all that time? Running off with a man or something? That's in other cases I know about, a little bit in my own family, I'm afraid. That's what it was. It was a man. I don't know. I always had a touchy relationship with my mom because she would draw me close and then backstab me. What I mean by that is she would shower love and attention on me, and as I got older, act as a best friend to me. And then she would humiliate me at family gatherings by repeating stupid things I had said and done. She liked to tell people I had a sexual deformity and would tell me to pull down my pants and show everyone. Oh my goodness. There really isn't a strong enough word to describe what is wrong with somebody who does that to a child. Oh, I'm just stunned. That's terrible. Okay. A couple of other things worth noting here is that there was also a great deal of sexual and physical abuse in my family. I am not surprised, which I witnessed, but fortunately didn't actually experience. Witnessing is enough to traumatize a person. A great deal. And I never had any friends when I was growing up. I had a very lonely childhood, even though I had siblings. Something happened to me when I was 14 years old that I'm only now just beginning to see in a different light. An older boy in town began coming over to see me and asking me out. I had never had a boyfriend, and frankly, I didn't like this boy at all. I tried to tell him no repeatedly, but then he would park outside my house and watch for me to come out. I'm not sure why, but I went with him one day for a car ride, and he insisted on having sex. I was a virgin. I tried to tell him no, but for some reason I thought I didn't have the right to refuse him. Isn't that just what happens? Isn't that just what happens to kids who haven't been cared for, to kids who have been exposed to sexually off behavior in the house and abuse? That's what happens. You don't even know. Who would have told you you have a right? You didn't have any rights, did you? Yeah, you were made to feel guilty for needing food. My goodness. So he came to pick me up regularly, you say, at my house for car rides. And I felt forced into a sexual relationship that I didn't want. I tried to talk to my mom and ask for her help with this awful predicament, but she was no help at all. She just said she would get me birth control. Wow. And then the bomb that shattered my entire life hit. My mom told me I had to move out. I was devastated. What was that about? Was it about a man in her life? I panicked because I didn't know where to go. It's too much to explain here, but I didn't have a family member I could go to, so my boyfriend said he would marry me. Oh, God. My mom was thrilled with this solution, because it was basically a way for her to never have responsibility for me again. I agreed to it even though I didn't want to. I believed I had to. So I was whisked away to the courthouse, and you probably can guess what happened from there. My husband turned out to be a drug addict. He abused me in ways that would take pages to explain, but I'll try to give you an idea. He didn't allow me to finish school because I might find a boyfriend. He didn't allow me to have any more contact with my family. He didn't allow me to leave the house without his permission, even to go into the yard. He would lock me in the house for days at a time and then come home at some random hour and force himself on me. My husband would literally tell me to obey him in all things, and I did. I had our first child close to my 16th birthday. That's how young you were for all this? I did not have the support of any kind from any single person. My baby was not allowed to have a bed, diapers, or other needed items. During my second pregnancy, I was not allowed to go to the doctor and had to put my newborn baby in a cardboard box on the floor. The thing that I can't make my son understand is that I stayed in this relationship for him and his brother. Okay, so that was where we started in this letter, is that he said he has chronic anxiety and depression, and he feels that your life choices have affected him very negatively. All right, right now I totally understand each of you, and we're going to come back to that. I knew how hard it was to grow up without a dad, and I didn't want that for my kids. I was uneducated and cowed down with abuse and did not have anyone to turn to, and sadly, this was my life for 10 years until my mom finally agreed to help me get out. Yeah, you needed a mom all this time. This never should have happened to you. And you needed a dad who would come in and knock that guy to the next solar system for treating you this way. That is such grave abuse, my goodness. When he left, I went back to school because I didn't know how I was going to raise my children on my own. You left, you good girl, you left. And here's the dumb thing, even though we were divorced, I obeyed my ex-husband when he told me what career I had to pursue. No, you're not dumb. You're not dumb. You never had the opportunity to develop your faculties of figuring stuff like that out. You raised yourself, So I went to college, got a good job, bought a house. But you bought a house? My gosh, you're amazing. And set myself to being the mother I thought my kids needed. And along the way, I met an older man who was very good to us. I wasn't in love with him, but I didn't actually believe there was such a thing. I thought of marriage as being a love that would grow over time. That's possible. I did love his values and his personality, but I didn't want to marry him and had refused him several times. Finally, he told me we were through unless I married him. I had become very close to my mother during this time, and she told me to marry the guy. Your mom with infinite great advice about relationships. Sorry, I'm not making fun of you. I'm just mad at her. I'm not sure why I listened to her, except that she had become my best friend, which is also totally sus about her. Okay. Unfortunately, over the years, my husband became more and more hateful and mean to my kids and to me. And this is what my oldest son is angry with me about. I didn't protect him from his dad, who beat his butt all the time. And I didn't protect him from my second husband, who was often surly and rude. And then one day I came home and my husband was gone and I never heard from him again. What a hard road, darling. That's just really hard. But also your son, yeah, he had his butt beat all the time and he was treated badly by his stepdad. So he has his experience that was painful. And so I understand where he's coming from. I can't understand this next part, Anna. When my husband left, my mom immediately changed her attitude towards me. We still spend a lot of time together, but she was never my best friend again. She's reverted to how she treated me in childhood, demeaning and hateful. Very interesting, but hardly worth bothering yourself with. I think people in the comments may have experience with something like this. Like, I don't like to throw around the narcissism word, but there's something about how she treats you and suddenly you're her best friend. It's always about her, isn't it? It's not, it may be totally a coincidence about anything going on in your life, but also you getting free of a bad man, well, maybe that threatens her too. She's having trouble facing herself, and well, she should. So you said, I met my current husband about the time my divorce went through. I fell in love with him so hard and so deep. So this is the third guy. I can't even tell you. For the first time, I got married to the person I wanted to be with. But sometimes I get angry with him over something he has said or done, and his family doesn't like me at all. To this day, they're very cold towards me. Well, this brought up a lot of intense emotions that I didn't even know I had. I totally get it. Every time I have to see his family, I have an emotional breakdown, a complete and total senseless, it's not senseless. Maybe it doesn't relate to them exactly, but I can't believe it took you so long to melt down and have a breakdown. It's so understandable, but I get it. This is not good. Okay, you've never seen anyone else have something this intense and you didn't even know it was possible. Sometimes I get furious and I erupt all over my husband with things I never could have thought I would think, let alone say. And sometimes I get so sad and upset that I wail with a bitterness that feels like it's coming from my soul. I love my husband so much, and yet I'm sabotaging our relationship with my emotions. I'm thankful I found your channel. All right, Freddy. So it's a life emergency right now. It's all coming to a head, isn't it? You didn't say whether you had ever received therapy for any of this. And this sounds like if the meltdown is so extreme that you can't help but damage good things in your life, then that is totally a reason to go get professional help. And someone you trust, someone who gets it, someone who's knowledgeable about childhood trauma and isn't going to just casually diagnose you. Yeah, I heard you were sort of fishing around on YouTube to see what's wrong. Is it autism? Is it bipolar? Well, I don't know, but I do certainly hear the symptoms of complex PTSD in there, which would absolutely make sense what you've been through. People who have been through a tenth what you've been through end up with CPTSD. So not everybody who's been through trauma gets it, but what you're describing is just like a total emotional dysregulation that doesn't feel related. It sounds like emotional flashbacks, which is a CPTSD thing. I'm going to tell you right now, there's a book called Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker. And I want you to get online and order that book with fast delivery for yourself right now. He's an amazing guy. He has CPTSD and he's a therapist who figured it out. And this book describes what we go through. And he's very good at describing emotional flashbacks and abandonment melange. You were literally abandoned as a kid over and over and over again. And so, you know, when I introduced this video and when I was thinking about what I wanted to title it, I wanted to say that many of us have had this experience that we can hold it together through the hard times. It's when we're safe that we completely lose it. And on the one hand, that's understandable, but on the other hand, we could damage this good relationship. It's a relationship you treasure. So I want you just quickly get that book. And then also, if you can, come take my daily practice course. It's free. It's always down in the description section. It's on my website, crappychildhoodfairy.com. And you can learn and try these techniques in an hour. There's also these FAQ videos. I lead free calls every week, and it's genuinely free. You can come. And it's a way that you can start to process feelings and thoughts that are yucky. And when you've been through trauma, that's like the substance of what the trauma is in your consciousness. It's just like, oh, I'm so terrible. Oh, I can't stand it anymore. And I'm so sad. And oh, everybody's going to leave me. You know, this stuff is going round and round. And trauma literally injures our ability to process thoughts and feelings. So it is backed up in there. And this writing is a technique. There's a lot of science why writing works. Well, our technique is a very specific writing technique followed by a very simple meditation. Both things have a lot of science behind them of why they help a person who's struggling with the effects of trauma to release some of it. When you have less like jammed up in here, you have choices. You can start to make better decisions about, should I see a therapist? Which one? What can I afford? Do I want to take this free course? Do I want to talk to this person? Who can I trust? Is my relationship actually good? And then I have lots of materials on emotional dysregulation to share with you. And there's a whole chapter on it in my book that's coming out in October this year, 2024. And there's good stuff online, and I just want you to start learning about emotional dysregulation. You can search on my channel for videos, and you can also look at the CPTSD course, the Healing Childhood PTSD course, and the Dysregulation Bootcamp. Like, everything I make is for people like you to start having a way to unpack what happened without hurting our lives with it. There is a way to do it, whether or not you have access to professional help. There's so much hope for you. You don't have to be defined by what happened to you anymore. Now I want to talk about your son and how he feels. I hear what he's saying and it sounds valid. His childhood sounds awful. And on the one hand, he does get to hold you responsible. You shouldn't have put him through it. On the other hand, you were literally, a teenage, you were so young. You were 16 when you had him, and you had gone from a totally abusive and neglectful household to a really, truly abusive marriage, and you were deprived of even being able to leave the house. So there's this funny way that he is not obliged to accept how terrible his childhood was because of the circumstances you were in. He is not I'm sure as a 35-year-old, he can have some understanding of it, but he's mad at you that you didn't leave. And not leaving is a trauma symptom. And I understand it. And you are not alone as somebody who's been in an abusive relationship who had trouble conceiving of a way to leave. Eventually you did. And like so many people who have left abusive relationships, you ended up getting right back into one the first time. And somebody who abused your children verbally this time, at least just verbally, but that's enough. That's terrible. So as a human being, he is hurt and had a right to hope and wish that he could have been born into a family that had the means emotionally, materially, to protect him from people like that. But like you, he was not born into such a family. And he's going to have to do his own work to come to terms with that he has a mother who loves him. I think what would be helpful in terms of your children is you doing your own healing, because probably for you to have to compartmentalize this all these years, you probably had to stuff a lot of stuff down, not just your feelings and not just your pain, but your awareness of just how bad it was. So that would be like really invalidating for your kids. And when you're actually actively supported in a program of healing, or maybe like more than one thing, I'm going to really suggest 12-step meetings to you. The Alcoholism, Al-Anon, this is a place where you can get lots of support. When you have lots of support, when every day you have people to call and see, and you will have this tremendous strength start to grow in you to be able to handle facing what happened, facing what you did or didn't do, having compassion on yourself about why you couldn't do it until you could do it. It's very, every way that you handled it is actually very normal for a person who was raised in an abnormal situation, but it still constitutes harm for your kids. So do you think you can hold those two things, that you were being harmed and so you couldn't protect your kids? You were trying to cope and raise the kids and care for them and get the college degree and the house and the job. You were trying to pull it together, but you were having trauma-driven decisions happening there. They were trauma-driven decisions. So compassion for him, compassion for yourself. And you're so not alone. So many people here on this channel have been through similar things and will understand. And we want to, this is, your crisis here is a beautiful thing in your life, that you now have a relationship worth saving. You have a reason to try and to strive and to get that support so that you can do your healing. People talk about like, oh, you need to heal your trauma. Like there you go. I just was being stubborn before and wouldn't heal it. It's not like that, is it? Like, what do you even do? But I really invite you, come into my program. We have a membership program where people can talk about this and teach each other and make suggestions. Well, this helped me and this helped me, and we have tools. I think anywhere you go, whatever you decide for helping you, whether it's a therapy, 12-step, my thing, all of the above, the important two things you need are tools that help you sort of get to the heart of the matter, and support to help you deal with the journey. Because as humans who have pain about this stuff, it's very common. Like if you had no support, you'd go diving in, you'd do some work, you'd hit a rough patch and you'd be like, I can't do this at all, So you can stay with it with support, and you can actually, there's a lot of like blessings that come from the sometimes painful work of healing your own trauma, that you develop friendships, you find like-minded people who understand as nobody else can. I really wish that for you, Freddy. And for everybody, when she said she had a masculine name, I had to find one. I never use real names, so don't worry. But I was trying to think of a name that's rare for women and common for men. Freddy. Just FYI. So the thing I want to leave you with is the free daily practice course. I encourage everybody here, give this a try. Give this a try and see if it can be a simple, no-cost way. All you need is a pen and a pencil and a little bit of time to watch the videos and give it a try. And see if you can get a little bit of emotional relief and mental cognitive relief from getting these thoughts on paper and following it with meditation. And it's a very specific technique, so it's not just like, don't just list a bunch of stuff. Learn the technique. It matters. The good feeling that you get of freedom afterwards matters very much, that you're not just dumping. It's following a technique that can be very helpful. If you had childhood trauma and you've sought help for the problems that it's caused you in your life, you may have been told that you needed to get in touch with your anger to heal from the trauma. And I know for some people there is something freeing about that, for a while anyway. But if you were already angry, if you were already just barely holding in the rage or the irritability or the contempt you inherited from growing up abused and neglected, that's a really dangerous assumption that what you need is to go even deeper into those harsh emotions. The fact is, people with complex trauma can tend to get emotionally dysregulated. Feelings can go from a normal level to a surge level suddenly, for seemingly no reason. And in the moment, it feels like the right level of anger. But later you can see what everyone around you could see in that moment, that it was an overreaction. And it's this kind of anger that can really cause problems in your life, especially when it becomes a habit, or when anger becomes a kind of drug that you unconsciously use to get up and out of depression. And I'll explain that in a minute. So how do you draw a line between healthy anger, it's an emotion we need, right? And unhealthy, dysregulated anger? How do you know the difference? Now, before I had any healing from my childhood trauma, one of my biggest problems was in my relationship to anger. And one of the most hurtful things that anyone's ever said to me is, you know, you are a very angry woman. And it hurts even now to say that. My meditation teacher once said that I used to be what he called a serrated knife. But I was. I was rough. I was sharp. I was carrying a lot of anger. And that's not irrational. It's what I knew. Because first of all, the adults in my life when I was a kid went way out of control with their anger. I grew up watching my dad rage at my mom and my mom berate my dad, and the two of them would smash things and get violent. And even after they were divorced when I was 7, anger and rage became the default way that they communicated about anything. So we had a lot of alcoholism in the family, and drunk people make everybody angry, and the angry people make the drunk person angry. So I grew up terrified of anger in myself and of angry people. And I know a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. I remember when I was 5 or so, I was angry in my own right about something, really angry. And instead of a temper tantrum, I went around the house and folded a folding chair, and I carefully took a vase down off the mantle and put it gently down on the hearth. And that was my way of saying I was fed up, damn it. I couldn't bear roughness, though. I couldn't bear the yelling and the doors slamming and the sound of breaking glass. There was a lot of that. The silence when you know something really terrible is coming, that used to really scare me. I hated violence. I still do. I hated the sounds and the smells of drunken people. And there was no way around it. It just put me on high alert and this weird kind of tension inside. So in my teens and 20s, I figured that I'd solved things by just avoiding angry people. And I thought of myself as a very peaceful, loving person. And it's not that I wasn't, but I had a lot of anger, and I didn't even know it sometimes. I remember before I ever learned to re-regulate my brain, my emotions were confused. When I acted angry, I was actually hurt. And when I was depressed, it was because I was angry. And I did passive-aggressive things like gossiping and making sarcastic comments. And I had BS'd everybody about what I was feeling for so long, I had no idea what I was feeling. And then I started therapy and had a place to talk about what happened. And it started out, I didn't really have strong emotions about my childhood, but boy, the therapist kind of confirmed how bad it had been, almost to a fault, I would say. And she'd want me to talk about it. And soon, oh yeah, I had some serious anger going. And the more I talked to her, the angrier I got. First like the legitimate anger, but then kind of like this weird, like dissociated anger. And I read some books and I talked to other angry people, and soon, like everywhere I went, with everyone I hung out with, I was coming off angry. I was the angry woman. So I was a real drag to hang out with, to be honest. It was me now. It was I who was raging and smashing things like had happened when I was a kid. And I wasn't as bad as my parents, but I intentionally broke some dishes in the kitchen once. I threw a ceramic mug out the passenger window of a car. And even thinking about this now makes me feel awful. It was frightening to the people around me. So I don't want to do that. I thought I was getting in touch with my feelings, but actually I was losing control of my feelings, and I was learning to amp them up and almost dissociate, using them like a drug to do that. It wasn't cathartic. There was no feeling of being done with the feeling. It just wore me out. It just tore me down. It alienated everyone. And there's nothing healing about that. So luckily, I stumbled on a new way to heal, and I quit that anger-based therapy and started using techniques that helped me very quickly get those harsh emotions quietly out, expressed. And this gave me comfort instead. It gave me a clear mind to get the focus off all the bad things from the past and onto my present day surroundings and how I was handling things. And from there, it was a lot easier to start solving problems and building a happy life. Now, maybe you're also in the process of finding the techniques that work for you, or understanding what part of your behavior is just trauma-driven and what is part of you. So if you want to learn more about common symptoms of childhood PTSD, I created a self-evaluation that you can take, and you can see what's happening for you. And there's a link to that. It's a quiz. I have a series of quizzes actually for different parts of your life and how CPTSD might have affected you. And I have that along with my daily practice calming techniques. And it's all on this page called the free tools page of my website, crappychildhoodfairy.com, free tools page. That page is linked down in the description section below. I just try to get it like into your hands very easily all the time. I'd like you to have that. Really, it's free. So these days, having stuck with my techniques for years and years and continuing to work on myself, I've made so much progress. And I wish I could say that kind of PTSD anger never comes back, but it does sometimes. And the progress is that I notice it right away and I can change course on it quickly. Some anger is normal and natural. It's a useful emotion. It's an honest response to unfairness and hurt. It tells you when action is required. With healthy anger, it flashes through you like burning paper. And sometimes it lasts longer, but at a certain point, when it's not helping you take action or solve problems, anger that lingers turns into unhealthy anger. And that is something many of us were encouraged to have, or in fact became addicted to having. Anger as a solution for pain. That's kind of the idea out there. And I wanted to tell you why it feels like that's true, that it's a solution, but it doesn't work. So you can think about your feelings on a vertical scale, all right? And way down here is death, or you're catatonic or something. And then right up here, well, right here, you're depressed. And then obviously there are degrees of depression, and it's a terrible place to get stuck. And if something you do or some therapy you try helps you go from depression to anger, which is pretty common in the psychology world, this might be helpful because it's up. You're going from depression up to anger. And it's pretty easy to help someone get angry. It feels good at first, doesn't it? Because it gets you out of bed and up off the floor. When you're hovering at the bottom of the emotional scale down here, anger and rage are a step in the right direction. And you think, wow, this is a breakthrough. I'm feeling my anger. And there's this energy to it. But it's a mistake to think that anger is the solution. This idea that feeling your feelings is inherently constructive is just not true. There's a time when we need to get in touch with our feelings and a time to be angry and a time to move through that. So if anger isn't transformed pretty quickly into some clarity of mind and sane action, it'll just take you right back down the vertical scale into depression, isolation, and down on the floor again. So what to do with the anger? For me, it is the most profound turning point of my life when I was shown how to put it on paper. And I put my fears and resentments about life and tragedies and the injustices and the petty little things that bother my mind. It all goes on paper, and I ask God to remove it. Now, you may not believe in God or any kind of higher power, and if that's the case, you can write it using my format and then write a release statement. So I ask God to remove it, you can release it. Writing and releasing is the core technique I teach, and this is how I had my transformation when I was sad and scared and struggling with PTSD symptoms. You just might be amazed at how much more effective and clear-headed you are with those resentful and blamey thoughts out of your head, at least for a little while, out and on paper, so that you can be emotionally free enough to see what needs to be done about problems. Because sometimes the situation is, it's just crying for you to jump in and act, to do something. And other times, nothing needs to be done. Sometimes it's just an angry, stray wisp of emotion that got dredged up and it softens and it's gone. So everything depends on you knowing the difference, asking yourself, is this anger something I need to attend to act on, to express myself, or am I basically having a CPTSD reaction? Now, when you have some freedom from the fearful and resentful thoughts, even if it's just for a little while, you're in a much better position to see the difference, to discern whether it's time to forget or time to get busy. And taking action is everything when it comes to healing your life. Now, if you're like I was when I was first using this freeing technique, I worried that if I lost my anger, I'd have no defense against abuse and pressure from people. And it's been my experience that the opposite is true. When my mind was tangled up with anger and resentment and someone was acting negatively toward me, I used to get paralyzed or confused. And I start flailing around trying to fix the situation without understanding what was going on. When I started releasing all that fear and resentment, and there is a technique, again, it's a technique. It's not just journaling. It's not just, I release it. But when I was actually getting free of all those racing negative thoughts and beliefs, I could see. I knew when I was being attacked, and I knew when the disturbance was actually in here. I got clarity. And with a clear mind, I'm able to take responsibility when that's in order. I can respond appropriately to problems. I can either protect myself or get away from problems and danger, or stay and work things out if that's the right thing, if that's what I want. I have a choice. And if you do this consistently, you have fewer problems. And when things do go wrong, you can work them out more gracefully. You don't have to fret. You don't have to freak out. When something upsets you, you're in the habit of clearing things up. So you know what to do first. And that's to calm the inner disturbance so that you can be clear what you need to do. Most of the time, all you need to do is take a deep breath and carry on. There are so many things in life that make it too easy to slide right into a state of resentment. When you have childhood PTSD, there's this feeling of dysregulated irritation, and it can make a person very harsh and critical. And if you don't have a way to release that, you can end up believing that other people are doing it to you, and what comes out of your mouth is blame. You're blaming people in your life. You're hitting them with resentment about it. It's most likely to come out towards the people who love you the most. And somewhere inside, we know that we're doing something wrong when we do that, and then we end up making up stories about why it's necessary to feel that way, why we have to tell these stories, why it's justified. And some people really are abusive, and your anger is necessary to propel you out of that situation and to get a boundary up. But sometimes the pain of things that happened in the past will make you resentful and cruel to people when it's not justified. They don't deserve it. So I have a letter today from someone I'll call Jill, and she writes, I'm divorced, 47 years old, 4-year-old son, not by my ex-husband. I'm the youngest of 3 with a supportive family. My parents split when I was in 1st or 2nd grade, yet I maintained a loving relationship with my dad. Got the fairy pencil. I'll be circling things I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's just read through and see what Jill's saying. My parents didn't hide any arguments from us, just the truth about the downfall of their marriage, and it turned out that Dad cheated multiple times and emotionally abused Mom. I've lived away from home for 10 years and plan to move back home and in with my mother and her husband, not my dad, this summer until I can save money. My mother is the poster child for codependence, low self-esteem, people pleasers, and can use passive-aggressive behaviors at the drop of a hat. My ultimate trigger is her indecisiveness. She can't even place an order at a fast food drive without getting dysregulated. I'm now realizing she may have CPTSD, as she's recently shared childhood and relationship traumas with me. I've seen her being dysregulated for years, yet I never understood what was happening. My mother is remarried to the man that came to live with us after my dad left. His presence made my siblings and me uncomfortable, and my mother would force us to speak to him, saying she only wants us to be polite and respectful. She's big on manners and appearances. She once threatened to take my new school clothes back to the store if I didn't say goodbye to him one night. This dynamic created such pain within our home that my sister left during middle school to live with my dad. I never asked what really happened because no one ever talked about these things. This man would bounce in and out of our home for years, and finally, when I was 26 years old, my mother announced she was marrying him. Why was this happening again? He had nothing to show for his life. No job, car, or a place to live. He was disabled, ex-drug addict living with his mother. I accepted her decision and tried to support her, as no one in the family liked him or approved of this marriage. Fast forward to now, and they're still married, and now he's sick. Dementia, CPOD, and on oxygen. My mother still holds on to this fantasy of us being what I call the Brady Bunch family. I've shared with her that if the Lord Jesus came to earth and told my sister to be friends with her husband, she would not. That's how much hatred is there.
My mom and I have always and still do have a special bond, yet I don't want to become her emotional bestie, her handywoman, her maid, chef, therapist, hairdresser, or have a fake friendship with her husband. I know nothing about him, not even his middle name. She also has some jealousy tendencies that have irritated me for years, yet she denies them. If I have a new hairdo or a new dress, I recently lost 70 pounds, she will say comments like, "Ooh, I want that too," or "Can you help me lose weight?" She also has rules for her home and has a bad habit of micromanaging. She also has expressed that she doesn't understand why my siblings and I can't see she needs help around the house. I'm all for pitching in, but her demands, entitled mindset, and behaviors can trigger my own CPTSD symptoms to new heights. I'm a carbon copy of her, minus the indecisiveness and micromanagement. And I don't want to be made guilty for living my life. That is, going out on weekends, talking on the phone after 9 p.m., or not wanting to cook for her husband like we're one big happy family. Mom is so excited for my son and me to come home. Her retirement, the pandemic, her bad knees, and stress from being caretaker to her sick husband have all caused her to be isolated way too long. I want to enjoy my time with her while I'm there. However, I'm just starting my own healing journey, and I've incorporated the daily practice, that's the thing I teach, into my life, and I'm finding awesome results with it. I'm noticing triggers and dysregulation, and I'm using the tools to calm them down. How do I set healthy, age-appropriate boundaries with her, as she is big on children being respectful and honoring to their parents? I don't want a repeat of Christmas a few years back when she passive-aggressively stated that she did so much for us. I stepped in as I'm grateful for all she does and told her to go lay down, I'll clean up. She ignored me and continued to help out, micromanage, by telling me how to sweep the floor. Later that evening, I walked into her room with a piece of cake, and instead of her asking right out if I could bring her a piece, she said, "Ooh, I want some cake too." She said it in a childlike voice. I was so triggered I snapped, which made her snap back and shut down. Also, her husband approached my sister and asked if they could be friends. He's in his 70s and is still trying to push a connection because of my mother. Side note, I phoned her on Father's Day. I was in my 30s, and she and hubby picked up at the same time. And before I could say hi, she cuts me off and says, "You didn't say Happy Father's Day, Jill." Well, you could imagine my emotional flashback. Please help me before I lose it. So a little after thing here, I wrote to Jill. I read this letter and I was very intrigued by it. I literally could not hear what the problem was. And I asked, I said, why is there so much animosity towards your mom's husband? Did he abuse you? Because it seemed to me like that was the missing piece, like there was some reason why everybody was like this. And Jill answered, our hatred towards him is that my sister and I never refer to him as stepfather. It's so silly, yet I won't let it go. He was not abusive toward me in any way. He was verbally argumentative toward my sister from what I saw and heard as a child. The animosity toward him was, 1, he wasn't our dad. We adored our dad because Mom kept the real him to herself. 2, he wasn't good enough. No job, car, home. Beneath her standards in our eyes. No education or social graces, etc. 3, Mom was forcing us to have a relationship or friendship with him and guilting us if we didn't. She justifies this even now by saying, I only want you to be respectful and polite. You're so rude and inconsiderate. I hope this helps, says Jill. Yes. Okay. I think I've got an answer for you. I'm going to read through again, Jill, and I'm going to see if I can help you with this. Okay. First of all, thank you for writing. Thanks for getting help with this. I think something must have been nagging you that, I don't know, the reason you can't get clear about this is because you're not seeing it clearly. That's my opinion. And I'm not sure you're going to like what I'm going to have to say. Now, usually I rush in and I defend people. But in this situation, this feels like a narrative you're using. And I'll tell you why. So, all right, you're divorced, you're 47, and you have a 4-year-old kid, not by ex-husband. You're the youngest of 3. Parents split when you were in 1st or 2nd grade. What's that, 6 or 7 years old? Yet you maintained a loving relationship with your dad. That's good. But evidently your mom raised the kids, the 3 kids, mostly on her own. Parents didn't hide any arguments, so there was a lot of fighting, but they never told you until you were an adult that the marriage came apart because your dad was cheating and was emotionally abusive. So I think that's really appropriate that they didn't tell you that. It's not appropriate to tell kids something that they didn't know. And it's also not appropriate for somebody to badmouth the other parent. So it sounds like your naivete about there being a problem was good. That was a favor they did for you. But it's this thing where you didn't accept it. It sounds like maybe you blamed your mom for the divorce. And I think that can happen. So I'm the child of divorce. My parents divorced when I was 7, and I was heartbroken about it, but it was necessary and right. They fought all the time. And then my kids, I got divorced with their dad when they were 1 and 4. They were really young. And I knew the marriage wasn't going to work out, but I probably wouldn't have ended it right then. He did. But it was terrible, and we fought in front of the kids, the same thing. Very bad for kids. I regret it very much, and I'm really, really grateful that we've repaired that relationship and, done our best mutually to marry other people who also love the kids and to create sort of an extended family, a Brady Bunch family, if you will. I've lived away from home for 10 years and plan to move back home. So hold on, I'm just doing the math. You're 47. You lived at home when you were 37. So that's unusual to live at home that long. Or maybe you were home for a spell. But as an adult, moving home is it's unusual. It's a big thing. And you're moving home again at 47 and plan to move back home with your mother and her husband this summer so you can save money. You'll be there with your kid too. That's amazing that they will help you do that. I just want to say, you're so lucky. You want to save money and they will actually let you stay there, especially after all this drama and hardship and bad feeling. My mother's a poster child for codependents, low self-esteem, people pleasers, and can use passive-aggressive behavior at the drop of a hat. Your ultimate trigger, you say, Jill, is her indecisiveness. She can't even place an order at a fast food drive without getting dysregulated. You know what? I used to be like that too. And I've been around other people who were severely abused who couldn't even order off a menu without getting completely flustered. It's a sign of abuse, Jill. It's not like somebody being a bad person. It's a sign of abuse. And so first, I just want to say, when you're in the presence of somebody getting dysregulated, I have videos for that. But one of the things that you can do is be a peaceful presence and not hurry them and not put negative pressure on them or criticism on them. A person who gets dysregulated will only get more dysregulated and into shame if they're pressured at times like that. So now that you have the gift of knowing what CPTSD is and what dysregulation is, you have the opportunity to reflect patience and kindness towards her when she gets like that. Everything you're saying about the codependence, the people pleasing, even the passive aggression, although the examples you gave me of passive aggression, I couldn't see it. But let's just assume you're right. She can't really say things directly when she's not happy. That would bother me too. But I just want to say, it's classic for somebody who grew up abused. And you didn't say what her childhood was, but I'm going to guess. There was a bully and or a very unreliable parent there, maybe an alcoholic, maybe some violence. She was invalidated. She wasn't listened to. When a person wasn't listened to as a kid, you will often see that coming out as passive aggression or indirect communication, what feels very manipulative. And I'm not trying to defend manipulative behavior. I'm just trying to say your mom, there's literally nothing in your letter that says your mom's a bad person. She sounds like somebody who has some trauma and she's been through a hard time. And one of the hard times she's had is that her kids are actually quite unkind to her. So that's where I'm headed with this. Try to bear with me. I have sympathy for you because I know you had a disrupted childhood too. But I think I can help you. I think I can help you to open your heart to life and to the world and to other people here because there's this wall that you've got up. I can see it. It's a very prickly wall and it's aimed at your mom and her husband by proxy. I'm now realizing she may have CPTSD as she has recently shared childhood and relationship traumas with me. I've seen her being dysregulated for years, yet I never understood what was happening. Yeah, now we know. We can have compassion for people. My mother is remarried to the man that came to live with us after my dad left. His presence made my siblings and me uncomfortable, and my mother would force us to speak to him, saying she only wants us to be polite and respectful. All right. I think that being polite and respectful to her boyfriend, then husband, is appropriate. the way that you guys hated him so much, that's why I was like, well, what happened? Did he abuse you? And you're like, no, he didn't in any way. He was argumentative with your sister, but it sounds like that's the most troubled relationship. So that he's just gotten like decades of grief from her. And so if he was argumentative, I can understand why. Now, I'm remarried. My husband is a step-parent to my kids. And I remember when my kids, they were very upset when they found out I had a boyfriend, and we didn't tell them for a year, after we had been dating, or they sort of vaguely knew, but they didn't meet him for a year until we knew that we were serious about dating. We were considering marriage. It was 2 more years before we got engaged, but, we were very consciously moving towards that. And probably, maybe your mom didn't have that, but her dating relationship was going toward marriage. And after her being in an emotionally abusive relationship with your dad who was unfaithful to her, honestly, I'm glad she had somebody to love her and be her companion. That's a blessing. And the complaints that you have about him, I'll read them later, but I just didn't get it. So you were forced to speak with him, but yes, he lived there. And it is very rude and inconsiderate and hostile not to talk to him. And I can't help but ask, if this had anything to do with your dad. It sounds like you had a kind of messed up psychological dynamic of loyalty to your dad, that you could not give your blessings to your mom moving on and having a new relationship, right? Because who she chooses, if he's an ex-drug addict, awesome. An ex-drug addict is like a miracle in its own right. If he didn't work, that's okay. That's okay. Many people don't work. You might not want that for yourself, but she wanted it for herself, and she's the one who has a home for you to come to. I'm just saying, like, you're the one who's not able to save money. She's doing okay. I think when you go stay in somebody else's home, you do live by their rules. And if one of their rules is, come on, be polite and respectful, of course you be polite and respectful. Of course you do. Now, you could force yourself to do that. But I don't think if you have to force yourself, I don't think you should go there. I think you should be doing the inner work with the daily practice to get free of all this resentment you have that they've done something to you by being together, by carrying on with life in the best way they could. They were not abusive, and they managed to make a life for themselves. And now he's sick. So this is not a good time for you to come in with drama or anger or anything like that. I'm going to emphasize that strongly. So you say your mom is big on manners and appearances. Okay, well, I don't think she's that into appearances because she's with a guy who doesn't have a job, as you say, and doesn't have fancy things. You're the one who's big on appearances. You're the one who's bothered that he doesn't have this social status. She's big on manners because manners represent kindness. And I think that's completely appropriate. And I just don't think you can ever go wrong by being kind and well-mannered with people. Being kind and polite, it doesn't get in the way of setting boundaries or protecting yourself from abuse or harm in any way. It's just the right way to move through the world. You will never regret interacting with people in a kind manner. That is the best thing. If you can do one thing in this life and you want to contribute positively to the world, be kind. Be kind to people. Be kind especially to the people who are helpless, who are sick, who are not able to work, who have injuries, who are struggling to function. I'm going to guess that your mom's husband also has a traumatic past. It's really common to have an addiction, and it's amazing when somebody gets out of it. I would also speculate that the two of them have some affinity because they've both been through a hard time, and they're both making the best of it. And I think it's pretty amazing that, given the circumstances, that they're letting in one of the children who has never accepted him. I'll just say that if one of my kids were rude or hostile to my husband, I would never let them stay here. My husband is, I've made a commitment, a vow to him. And I stand by him. I have his back. And the same thing with my kids, but I also wouldn't tolerate my husband being terrible to my kids. I wouldn't have married him if he were terrible to my kids. He's kind and polite to my kids. He's generous with them. It's an interesting dynamic, being a step parent, as much as you don't want to call him that. You were a child when he came along, and so he is that to you. It's not the same as your dad. You're not being disloyal. It's just that you have a child generational role as your mother's child, and he's her husband. And so he has that dynamic with you, and it calls for that sort of respectful behavior. He's married to her. It's his house. It's his house. I think it's great that they help you, and I don't think there's anything wrong with needing help, financial help, but I just think that that it's absolutely necessary to be kind and respectful to the people you're asking to help you. I think it's just flat out. And if you've got this going on towards them, I am going to wager that this is bleeding into the rest of your life, that you're having difficult relationships with men and women and other people, and it's going to be hard. And because you have a kid, I'm just going to implore you, like, model for your child what it's like to be loving towards others. This is not where anybody's at risk of abuse. It's your beef with him. Well, let's read about what you said about him. Okay, so she's big on manners. She once threatened to take your new school clothes back to the store if you didn't say goodbye to him one night. Oh, Jill, I would have done that too. Not saying goodbye is petulant and childlike. And it sounds like you were a child. They were school clothes. But that's how you teach children to have some manners. It sounds like your mom wasn't very effective at holding the boundary on good behavior, because the bad childlike resentment at him not being your dad has continued for decades. That would be typical of a codependent person, to just feel like she has to keep being nice to you even though you keep being mean to her. I'm just going to tell you again, I think you need to give her a break. That was very reasonable to just say, look, you don't get to have all these privileges if you can't give the basic decency of courtesy to the man who lives here and is my husband. Okay. So then you say it was so much pain that your sister left during middle school to live with your dad. Okay. In middle school is painful, and kids very often go live with one parent and then the other. And that's hard, but that's normal. Okay. Nobody's the bad guy in something like that. Divorce is the bad guy. Your mom couldn't see it coming. Your dad is the one who made something bad in the marriage. Maybe there was never the ingredients of a good marriage there. I'm not judging them. It happens to half of all marriages. And if you're here like on Crappy Childhood Fairy, like how many of us have parents who are still together, who stayed together till one of them died? Practically nobody, sweetheart. It's part of it, It's part of coming from a hard family. It's part of it. So he went to live with your dad. I never asked what really happened because no one ever talked about these things. And this man would bounce in and out of your home for years, and finally when you were 26, she announced she was marrying him. So it sounds like for 20 years they dated, and you say bounce in and out of the home, but for a single woman, it's okay. It's actually, I could see when you were a child if he was moving in and moving out and moving in and moving out. Maybe you're not telling me about like emotional pain for your mom and stuff, but if that was the case, if she was just all like messed up over him all the time and they were breaking up, yeah, that's a lot of drama. And I'm really sorry you went through that. But it still is not a good reason to live your life resentful. When you were 26, she said she was marrying him. And you show a little mad, sad face there. Why was this happening again? Because she loved him and she wanted to be married to him, and she's an adult and she gets to do that. He had nothing to show for his life. Well, he did. This part hurts my heart, Jill. To say that someone has nothing to show for his life because he doesn't have job, car, place to live, disabled, ex-drug addict, living with his mother. He's a human being. He has everything to show for his life. You're talking about status and material things, and you're like at an age where you have a child and you might be looking for a husband, and you want to look for somebody who makes money and who can, support you in a middle-class lifestyle, and that's great. That's a boundary you get to have. But your mom has done just fine for herself with this man who she wants to be married to. And I got to call you on this, Jill. See the humanity in people even if they have no job or no car. They are real people. They have hearts. They have love. And apparently he's quite comforting to your mother, and he stood by her even though her kids have been so hard on him. That's a factor that has broken up many a marriage of people who try to put a life together for themselves after divorce. So I'm happy that she has a partner. I'm sad that he's dying. That's going to be hard for her. So fast forward to now, and they're still married, and now he's sick. Dementia and CPTOD. Oh, that's really hard. CPTOD, for anybody who doesn't know, it's a lung thing. It's very hard to get air, and it's terminal, and he's on oxygen. My mother still holds on to this fantasy of all of us being what I call the Brady Bunch family. I don't blame her. That's a good fantasy for everybody to have family harmony together, for you to love her and accept her husband. This is a joke you were saying. If the Lord Jesus came to earth and told your sister to be friends with her husband, she would not. That's how much the hatred is there. Hate is a terrible thing. And that's why I asked you the question about him. Did he do something wrong? And he didn't. My mom and I have have always and still do have a special bond, yet I don't want to become her emotional bestie, handy woman, maid, chef, therapist, hairdresser, or have a fake friendship with her husband. It sounds like you're scared of getting codependent. You said in a little bit later that you're a carbon copy of her. So you're worried about being codependent and getting all enmeshed with her. Okay, good boundary. That's a good boundary to recognize that you need to have. That's your fear. You do the daily practice. So I have fear if I go live at home, I'm going to have to be all these things to her and be all enmeshed with her, and it'll drive me crazy. So there's another option here. You can be kind and loving and have a boundary and not become those things to her. But since you're 47, I'm guessing she's in her 70s, and she's got a husband who's dying and who's got dementia and COPD, and she could use some help. And I think help would, since you're using her to go live with her for help, it would be really appropriate and mature of you to reciprocate and give her help. And helping somebody doesn't have to be enmeshment. It can be a gesture of love and responsibility and duty. And it feels good to be that person. When you give somebody out of love, it feels good. When you give somebody out of trying to keep them from being mad at you, it feels bad. But I'm just hearing in here, I recognize this. I had a very angry relationship with my mom. She died when I was 30. But I had something like this with her. I was just mad at her. I liked my stepdad quite a lot. He's still in my life. But I was mad at her. She was the drinker. And I really, really regret treating her in an angry way during her final years while she had cancer. But it's all I had right then. So I'm just kind of like trying to talk to you as my younger self and say, get that daily practice going. So I got the daily practice like the very week she died, which wasn't a coincidence. I was just really effed up, emotionally. And I was shown a way to get free of all this stuff, and the anger and the sadness came pouring out and pouring out and pouring out. And so without having her alive to talk to, I was able to heal so much of my pain and resentment at my mom about stuff. And you get to do that while she's alive. And I'm just saying, like the situation you're telling me, it would be a great kindness to her to embrace the fact that this is the man she loves, and she's probably going through a lot of grief right now that he's dying and that he's, losing it. That's very sad. You've always had this great relationship. You don't want to get enmeshed. She's always had some jealousy tendencies that have irritated me for years, yet she denies them. If I have a new hairdo or a new dress and you recently lost 70 pounds, that's fabulous. That indicates a great deal of personal growth. I know losing weight takes focus and personal change, so good for you. That's a sign of health. She will say comments like, "Oh, I want that too," or can you help me lose weight? So I just got to say, I don't hear why you hear that as jealous. I hear that as admiration, and also, just like, gosh, I want to lose weight too. Like, don't you hear that from a lot of people? I know when I had significant weight loss, a lot of people said, "What plan did you use? I want to use that plan." And I took it as a compliment, not jealousy, not jealousy. I question that, whether it's really jealousy. I'm not there. But really, get your fears and resentment on paper about that. It doesn't sound like it from what you're describing. Okay. She also has rules for her home, very appropriate. I have rules for my home. And she has a bad habit of micromanaging. She also has expressed that she doesn't understand why the siblings can't see that she needs help around the house. So I guess she feels that you guys don't help her enough. And you say, "I'm all for pitching in, but her demands, entitled mindset, and behaviors can trigger my own CPTSD symptoms to new heights." So I'm not hearing entitlement. And this is one of the other really hard things that I have to say, but I want you to hear it. I think you thinking that you can live there and not help her to the degree that she would like you to help her, that's the entitlement. And I just want to challenge you to see if you can kind of relax that idea that as an older person who's housing you, she actually is legitimately entitled to get some help around the house. It's true. That is it. And conversely, you're not actually entitled to live there or entitled to live there and be unkind to her husband. Okay? I'm just calling it. I hope you can hear this. This might be making you really mad, and I'm just going to have to let that be. But I think this could be life-changing for you to really get this and get it onto the paper. Get to the daily practice calls. Maybe make an appointment with Kara, the coach on our team who can do one-on-ones with people doing the daily practice. That's on the coaching page of my website. But she can help you get to the heart of this resentment so you can bust it open and wash it off and be lighthearted and warm-hearted and open-hearted towards these very precious people in your life. You'll never have them again. So you said you don't want to have a fake friendship with her husband and you know nothing about him, not even his middle name. I'm going to give you an assignment if you're willing to accept it. Get to know him, talk to him. If his dementia isn't too far gone, sit down and ask him questions about himself. Spend an hour asking him questions, let him talk, and don't interrupt. Learn about him. Learn about this guy who loves your mom. You might find out something that opens your heart. And gives you empathy for him and helps you see why your mom loves him so much. And I think it would mean a lot to your mom if you would take that time to get to know him. And I'm thinking, my husband and I we just had lunch with my stepdad, and I loved what my husband did. We were chatting away, and my husband was so interested in my stepdad's a really, really interesting person. And, but because I was a kid with him, I think I don't see it as easily as my husband did. And my husband was asking him these questions, and the answers were, I was like, really? I didn't know that about you. And having his perspective helped me realize and feel a little bit embarrassed that I hadn't asked those questions myself, about how he grew up and what happened, in his youth, and there, great stories. But that's how, when we give our attention to other people, that's a way to show love. And often I notice that the older people get, and especially, like you said, with the pandemic and retirement, there's been so much grave isolation that it's a loving gift to anybody we encounter. If somebody seems to you to be lonely and need an ear to listen to, and you're just hanging out, do that for them. Do that for them. And use your daily practice to deal with the triggers that come up. Because the triggers that come up, it's a trigger. It's not even necessarily anything that needs to be done anything about. It's a trigger, and you just kind of relax it by getting the fear and resentment on paper, ask for it to be removed. I'm so glad you have that. I'm so glad you have that, Jill. Okay. You say you're a carbon copy of your mom, minus the indecisiveness and micromanagement. Okay, so good. You probably have your own things, right? We all do. And you don't want to be made to feel guilty for living your life. And you talk about going out on weekends, talking on the phone after 9, or not wanting to cook for her husband, like they're one big happy family. Okay, the first two, talking on the phone after 9, not going out on weekends, sound like teenage things. And so if your mom is still doing that to you as an adult when you're there and you're kind and polite, I think you can set a very polite boundary and say, Mom, sorry, I need a little downtime of my own. But you have a 4-year-old kid. You have a 4-year-old kid. And so what I'm wondering, I didn't hear this, are you expecting them to babysit? And is that more than she can do right now? That's a piece that you missed right there. So I want to bring your attention to that maybe if you're going out on weekends, you might need to find another arrangement. I don't know, maybe they help you. If you're just saying, I don't want to be treated like a child, oh, this is going to sound mean, but you got to act like an adult. You have to be that loving, helpful person. And when a mother is in their 70s and a daughter is in their 40s, the roles are reversed now. You're the one who should be providing the extra care. That's just the natural order of things. So I think you'll find you have a lot more harmony when you show up with love. And I get it, her boundaries are crap. The enmeshment is really uncomfortable. But you're in a special group of people now, of people who have tools for how to deal with that. So I encourage you to give it a try. Then you say, I don't want to cook for her husband like we're one big happy family. If you can't live there and cook for her husband, and you just want to be selective about that and cook for yourself or just for your mom, I don't think you should go there. I think that's so hostile and so unkind that you shouldn't go there. I think they're going through a lot right now with his illness. Your mom's lonely. It'd be nice if you could stay nearby, but I don't think you should bring that kind of stress in the house. I know if I were in your mother's shoes, that would be so upsetting. It would just break me. I couldn't do it. I'm sure she's in a lot of grief right now and pain, and I wouldn't do that to her. It's not fair. You said that she's very excited for you to come home. She's been very isolated, sick husband, pandemic, etc. And you want to enjoy your time with her while you're there. However, you're just starting your own healing journey and have incorporated the daily practice. And I hear you. And I would say if they were fine and they could be expected for everything to just stay status quo for a long time, I would say, don't go there, go stay somewhere else. But the reason why I think you might want to just kind of buck up and use your daily practice twice a day and meditate and get a buddy and go to daily practice meetings and do all of that is so that you can show up and go be helpful and supportive of your mom at this hard time. And you would have the added benefit of saving some money. As a single mom, I'm sure that's very valuable to you. And you might just grow much closer to your mom. It can be very healing to be close to heal from all those resentments. And you can actually get free of resentments and fears quite quickly if you have a mind to do it through the daily practice. So I'd really encourage you, like, dive in. If you go into the membership program with me, there's a Facebook group where there's like peer-led daily practice calls all day long, like 3 or 4 a day, all over the world at different times. You can join in. There's a lot of support for people who are doing just what you're doing. They're trying to heal their lives. They're trying to calm their triggers. There's a place for this, okay? So you were asking, how do I set healthy age-appropriate boundaries with her? She's big on children being respectful and honoring to their parents. So she's setting a boundary with you. You need to be respectful and honor the parents. Can you do it? I would just say, if you cannot respect and honor and be kind to them, don't go. That's not fair. That's her boundary. And you know she's weak on boundaries, but those are her boundaries. Don't take advantage of her just because she doesn't kick you out for being unkind. Don't take advantage. I really encourage you, show up with love. Show up with love and forgiveness and an open heart, and just like, see if you can soften your heart towards them. See if you can soften up a little bit. It feels good. It feels good to just soften up and go, you know what, this is okay. And these people aren't going to be on earth very long. And it's a nice thing you're doing if you can go hang out and just show up with love and acceptance. Everybody wants to be accepted. Everybody wants to be seen and heard and loved and accepted just as they are, and so do you. And sometimes you can't get that from people in the way that you want, but you can give it to people. And it's always worth doing if you can, okay? If you can hold your own boundaries. So you say, I don't want a repeat of Christmas a few years back when she said she did so much for us. And I stepped in as I'm grateful, and you cleaned up, but she couldn't do that. You know, I've done that. Yeah, it sounds like she got flustered and dysregulated, and she was resentful and hurt about who was cleaning up, and she felt taken advantage of. And you know what? I'm a mom of young adults, and I feel the same way sometimes. And there's probably been times I did the dishes. I was just, it's always me. I have to do everything. That's like my lot in life. But when I'm on that mantra, I know I need to sit down and write. So I have tools. Your mom does not. Who knows? Maybe she'll pick it up from you. Maybe. Don't force it. I've never had luck forcing it on anybody. And then she continued to help out or micromanage by telling you how to sweep the floor. Yeah, you know, it's how it is. Later that evening, I walked into her room with cake, and she didn't ask right out if she could have a piece. She said, "Ooh, I want some cake," in a childlike voice. So you say you got triggered, and it's like, yeah, that sounds like your trigger. It's just, in my scheme of things, that's like not that big a deal, but I empathize with you because I know what it's like to be kind of fed up with a certain energy with somebody, and that's what it sounds like it is with you. It's like it's a certain energy that you don't like, but you have no choice but to accept. You can't change her. You can leave, you can hang out. If you hang out, I encourage you just to accept. Just accept her as she is. See her, hear her, love her, accept her. It'll be so relaxing for her, and relaxed people who feel accepted are less likely to go into their passive-aggressive behavior. They might still do it, but there's the thing. That's the catch of people. It's like, we can't control them, okay? So the Father's Day thing, and she said that thing, you didn't say Happy Father's Day, and you said you had an emotional flashback. I can't imagine an emotional flashback about that, but I'm just trying to understand what that was. Is that it just sounds like there was tension between them, and she felt like she had to stand up for him, and it was awkward and weird. But you know what? If what they want is for you to say Happy Father's Day, say Happy Father's Day. Just give the love, give the kindness, help out where you can. It's nothing to say Happy Father's Day. I say it to my stepdad, and my kids say it to their stepdad, and their stepmom and I are celebrating our birthdays together soon. Like, love is good. It's good to have a loving extended family. It's a very positive thing. And if people are not abusive, you have a huge opportunity with you. So you said, please help me before I lose it. I hope this helps. This is one of the toughest love videos that I've made before, and I hope you feel the love in it. I identify with you. I want to save you a lot of the grief that I went through from being hard-hearted towards people in my life. I'm so grateful to have the people in my life, even the characters. It's good to have people to celebrate holidays with and to help each other in their time of need and just to be together. It's a very positive thing. So I send you my love, and I hope you find strength in doing this, and come see us in the Daily Practice Call. I do them twice a month. They're free for anybody who's taken the Daily Practice course.